Louis Riddick here on the program. How are you, Louis?
I'm doing good, Rich. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Okay, and I appreciate you are providing the insight in our Honda Insider Report here on this program. When you heard Gettleman say that at the Combine, what did you think?
Well, I guess if you compare it to what happened yesterday, I didn't see this happening. I really didn't see this kind of thing happening, and I don't know what kind of interference maybe he was trying to run at that time. Maybe he was trying to drive up Odell's price because ultimately he knew he was going to trade him and didn't want people to think that he was on the block. I don't know really what his tactics were, but it sounded believable at the time. Even when our own Josina Anderson was reporting that people were still calling, the thing that I kept saying was this: you can easily squash this kind of thing by just not picking up the phone. But the fact that they were picking up the phone led you to believe that it had legs, and I was shocked. I was shocked. The owners really aren't in the business, Rich, as you know, of paying somebody $21 million in cash. We're not even let's not talk about accounting mechanisms like cap space and all that. Cash, and then letting the guy walk. And I know from interviewing there and talking to them, Mr. Mara wanted Odell to work out in New York. That's why he signed him to that contract last year. He wanted him to work out because he knows how special the kid is. He knows, and we all can see it. It's easy to see how special he is. So for this to actually happen, some things had to go terribly wrong as far as the relationships in that building with the people who he's working with or something, in order for you then to turn around months later, weeks later after Dave makes that statement, and trade him for a mid-level one, a late 3 that's basically a 4, and Jabril Peppers. That is not the kind of return you get on a guy who you just gave $21 million in cash and let him walk out the door. It doesn't make sense, and I was shocked. I was just flat out shocked.
It doesn't make sense because all I'm hearing, Louis, is that, that he is a handful, that his personality is so dynamic that sometimes the always being on kind of maybe rubbed people the wrong way, but I mean, you work with people like that. I mean, everybody listening to this conversation and watching right now could probably point out somebody in their workplace just like that. But
yeah,
I mean, this is the National Football League. Shouldn't it be incumbent upon the coaches or ownership to figure out how to make that work? That's the again. I don't know exactly what was going on there, but all I'm hearing is that, and the fact that they think that they're better without him because of the way that they played. Offensively, with him out of the lineup towards the end of the season, gives them an idea that they might be better off without him, Louis.
Yeah, and I'll just start there. There's no way you're better off without Odell Beckham. There's no way. And then circling back to what you're saying about aren't you paid, and isn't kind of your job to make those kinds of things work, especially a guy with this profile? Of course it is. If I took anything away from my time in Philadelphia with Andy Reid, is that he used to constantly say, this is a business of relationships. And you find a way to generally manage these kinds of things, even when they're not ideal, even when they may be a little bit uncomfortable. You find a common ground because we're in the business of stacking up W's, not L's. We're in the business of winning games. And Odell is the kind of guy who helps you win games, and he helped the Giants win games. And I understand, look, we can all see, even if you don't know the kid, that he's his own man, and he has a unique way of going about things. But when you hear some of his teammates talk, just on the surface, even if you don't know his teammates, you hear some of the people talk about how passionate he is about the game, how serious he is about trying to be the best to ever play it, how hard he works in practice. I've never heard anybody say, and maybe sometimes, some guys aren't going to come out and say this anyway, but I've never heard anybody say, yeah, you know what? I don't like playing with him. He is a pain in the you-know-what. He is someone that kind of takes away from my game and my focus and my preparation. I've never heard that. And I know how important it was to Mr. Mara for this to work out, because I'll just tell you this. One of the first questions he asked me when I interviewed with him was, what do you think of Odell, and how would you manage this? What would be your tactic? How would you manage this relationship? Because he used the word special. He used that word. So for this not to work out, I guess you didn't manage the situation, and maybe it was just one of those where, sometimes in this business, as you know, it gets personal. You're dealing with human beings, and sometimes it gets personal, and sometimes you just either can't figure out a way or you don't want to figure out a way to try and get along with someone who's just maybe not, who doesn't do things the way you want them done. And that's unfortunate because, look, their loss, maybe it is a gain for them as far as culture is concerned, and I'm a big believer in that too. I've said that even about the Antonio Brown situation, which is much different than this one in Pittsburgh. But sometimes, culture is something it's not tangible. You can't really measure it, but it's real, and it's real. And good environments lead to success as well. But I have a hard time believing that this team's going to be better off. And I think down the stretch there, as far as them having more production without him in the lineup, look, that's a small sample size, man. And this football team's going to be different again this year. So, and the great Bill Belichick says this all the time. You can talk about carrying momentum from one year to the next and hang your hat on things you did in the past. That stuff doesn't mean jack. It doesn't carry over one year to the next. It's a whole different football team. A whole different schedule, a whole different set of circumstances that you're going to be dealing with in 2019. But confirmation bias is one of those things that people always engage in the NFL. They will point to things in order to justify the decisions that they're trying to make and trying to sell it to others. And it sounds like maybe that's what they're doing a little bit. But we'll see. It's going to play itself out on the field. I just personally, look, I said it right from the get-go. I'm shocked and stunned that it happened.
Louis Riddick of ESPN here in the Honda Insider Report. Okay, now that we know Le'Veon Bell's location and we know the contract that the Jets and he agreed to that will be official with the new league year, his 2018 sit-out gambit, do you think it paid off for Le'Veon Bell, Louis Riddick?
No, I don't, because, look, Le'Veon was after something that was going to set the bar and set a precedent for guys who were to follow him, who he thought who had that unique skill set like him. He was trying to be a trailblazer, meaning don't value me like a traditional running back. Value guys who have the skill set that I have as weapons, as unique weapons, and therefore we need to be paid differently. Our ceiling, our financial ceiling needs to be different than your typical running back. And he didn't do that. He didn't accomplish that. Now, look, I can't really call it an L when you get $35 million guaranteed.
Right.
Okay, relatively speaking, I think he's going to be all right. He's going to be able to make his mortgage payment this month.
Right.
But he was after something unique, Richie. You know that, and he was very open and upfront about that. But there were things stacked against him that I think maybe he just didn't really factor in enough.
Like what?
His age, his injury history. His history of not making good decisions maybe off the field that would jeopardize his eligibility. Those are the kind of things that, look, in contract negotiations, those are the kind of things that GMs use against you. They do. And on top of it, he's playing a position that has a short shelf life, and GMs have had a lot of success obtaining value and performance at that position through the draft. That's a lot of stuff to push against in order to try and do something that no one else has done as far as redefining that position. So he made the bet. He took the bet. He lost, generally speaking, in terms of what he wanted to ultimately accomplish. But $35 million is a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
And so maybe when it all comes down to it, interestingly enough, Antonio Brown's method of leaving his team was more effective, potentially. Yeah. And how do you think the Brown acquisition by the Raiders, after what did happen or may not have happened, but we assume happened in Week 17, with him and Ben and the Steelers, how will the fact that Antonio essentially Instagram lived and tweeted along with that his way out of Pittsburgh will manifest itself for other wide receivers in future years, Louis? Do you think this is a one-off or what?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a one-off. I would caution guys against trying to do that. He got lucky in that there was a team and a coach in particular who really, really admired his work ethic, his production on the field in the past, and what he projects to be his production on the field in the future. And you can't take anything away from Antonio in that way. And he's also this. He's a unique talent. He's done things in this league that no one else has done. So for the top 2%, 1% of players, maybe you can take that risk, and maybe you can go ahead and Instagram your way off of a team and onto another one and kind of game the system, so to speak, and get what you want. And maybe more guys will try it. I would just say a lot more people are going to fall flat and not get what they want than are going to get what they want. And I don't think this is going to set a precedent, because you know how the league gets, and you know how general managers and people get in terms of their groupthink. People will start pushing back against that, and they will start using the distraction excuse, the bad apple excuse, whatever they want to use in order to make sure that guys don't think that they can just start doing that. So I think that's a unique situation. I will say that I think Antonio had some points as far as what he was upset about. Would I have wanted to go about it that way? No. But in the end, look, he got what he wanted. But I don't think this is going to start a tidal wave of people going, hey, you know what? I'm just going to sit out. I'm going to make crazy statements on Instagram. I'm just going to, I'm going to do features left and right and put all my business out there in the street. And I'm just going to do. I don't think that's going to happen. All
right, some quick hitters for you here, Louis Riddick in the Honda Insider Report. While we were having this conversation, Earl Thomas and Mark Ingram signed with the Baltimore Ravens. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that shifts in any way, shape, or form their ability to repeat in the division, with everybody assuming, and I started the show saying this is Cleveland's division to lose now. What do you think?
So I love the Earl Thomas signing. I love it. Between him and Tyrann Mathieu, a little bit different players, but two just dynamic guys who play a position that I think people don't give enough credit for in terms of how important it is to have guys who play those positions on your football team and play them at high levels. And Earl's just a difference maker. He's one of the great erasers of this league of all time. He can erase mistakes for everyone else because of his instincts, his speed, his competitiveness. So I love the signing. And I love Mark Ingram. I really hoped and thought that they would keep those two together, meaning Mark and Alvin Kamara down in New Orleans. I like the signing for Baltimore. I like the signing for Baltimore in terms of how they want to play. I don't know if I necessarily like the signing for Mark, because I'll tell you this, until Lamar Jackson really proves that he can keep people from putting 15 guys in the box and daring him to throw, it's going to be tough sledding for running backs. Tough sledding. The game isn't going to be as loose, in the seams and the spacing isn't going to be as open for him in Baltimore as it was in New Orleans, because the quarterback hasn't proven himself yet. If he can prove himself, then it'll benefit Mark. But we'll see. Baltimore has a lot to prove.
Okay.
They've lost a lot of good players, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
So another quick hitter for you here. Kyler Murray did not get measured. We're talking to you before he throws at his pro day. Is he still, in your mind, the number one overall pick in this draft as it comes up shortly, Louis?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he will be, because of who's picking number one overall, unless they get out of there, unless Arizona gets out of there. Is he the number one quarterback, my top-ranked quarterback? No, he's not. I would take Dwayne Haskins, all things being equal. But I think he will go number one overall as long as Arizona sits there and some team doesn't decide to offer up a Mike Ditka-style trade and say, we'll give you our whole draft, for the next couple of years if we can come up there and pick number one overall. I think he's going to go there.
Yeah, but Arizona's brass, owner, coach, general manager, they're not at the Oklahoma Pro Day. Read those tea leaves for me, Louis. Yeah, what does that mean?
You know what that is? I mean, that's saying, look, if we don't really have anything to gain by going there. If we're going to pick a number one overall, but we'll have plenty of time and plenty of opportunity to meet with him individually one-on-one. We don't need to show everybody, just because we're not there doesn't mean we're not interested. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything, quite honestly, Rich.
Okay.
It doesning mean anything.
Did you hear anything different than what Charlie Casserly reported on NFL Network about his work habits, study habits, his interviewing at the Combine? Did you hear anything different?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've heard things that were just the opposite, that were 180 the opposite direction. And, that's how this time of year goes. And I think sometimes, especially on the negative, on the downside, you have to be very careful with believing what teams tell you, because everybody has an agenda. And sometimes that agenda, it's not very good. It's a little bit disingenuous. And quite honestly, it's a little bit vicious and unfair. I don't know if you shouldn't be saying those kinds of things about these kids coming out like that can seriously alter, the direction of their draft day. I don't like that kind of thing at all. And I definitely don't like when people then will put it out there and repeat it as if it's the gospel, especially if you weren't there on the down. So I don't like that kind of thing. I have heard very, very positive things about Kyler. And I think ultimately it's not going to affect him. I think he is going to go number one overall.
Two last ones for you, Louis Riddick. And with the NBA free agency, we're We've seen certainly last couple of years, some changes, and it didn't change that the Warriors were going to win it, right? I mean, so anything that's happened in the last 24, 48 hours, you got Le'Veon Bell going to the Jets. You've got Odell Beckham going into the AFC for Cleveland. You've got Antonio Brown staying in the AFC to the Raiders. Obviously, Earl Thomas coming into the AFC with Mark Ingram to the Ravens. Has anything, in your estimation, in the last 48 hours, when it becomes official new league year, changed the fact that the Patriots are the champions of the AFC and the NFL? Lewis?
Until proven otherwise. Look, the Patriots they operate on a different level. They just do, and we all know why. But of all the things that have happened transaction-wise in the AFC, Cleveland, as long as Freddie Kitchens and his coaching staff can manage it all and now develop a plan to utilize it and develop it, Cleveland is back. Cleveland is for real. And that is not just hyperbole. They have got weapons that you better strap up for, and you better have a plan to deal with, because they've done a good job of stockpiling talent. We know there's a difference between acquiring talent and building teams. It's Freddie's job to build the team now, but that team's for real. It's as exciting of a time to be involved with Cleveland Brown football right now as it has been since maybe I left there in the 90s. When we actually won a playoff game.
That's right.
We actually won one.
That's right. Don't sleep on the fact they got Sheldon Richardson and Olivier Vernon as well. Ask him the poll question out the door. Ask him the poll question.
Think of some of the young guys they already have.
I know.
How about the runner? How about Nick Chubb?
I know.
How about Kareem Hunt? I mean, come on now. They got players and young players.
All right, Lewis, real quick. Whose move will have the biggest impact? Odell, Le'Veon, Antonio Brown, Nick Foles.
That's right. Another NFC person into the AFC.
Oh, man. You know what? I'll tell you this. Can I change it a little bit like this and say this? Which one's going to be the most scrutinized and which one's going to be under like the white-hot lights every week? It's going to be Nick Foles. Nick is kind of carrying with him the same responsibility that Kirk Cousins carried with him to Minnesota last year. They're saying that in order to pay Nick what they paid him, and given where this team was just a year ago, as far as being a couple plays away from being the AFC representative in the Super Bowl, that he can be that difference. That's what they're saying. Now, they have some more work to do. That's the one I'm most interested to watch. I'm a big fan of Nick's, and he is all about relationships and all about fit and all about play calling and all about rhythm and execution. We're going to see. They made a big bet on him. A big bet. That's the one I'm watching the closest.
Well, I'm a big fan of yours, which is why I allowed you to change the poll question. But do me a favor and answer it as asked. Which one do you think biggest impact?
Oh man, I'm gonna say Odell. I'm gonna say Odell Beckham.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
And that's what I'm telling you has Giants fans irate right now. He's going to blow up. I bet you and I say blow up in a good way.
That's right.
He's going to go off in Cleveland.
That's right. They've got kicking nets there as well. Hey, Lewis, I really enjoy watching you on ESPN. When I watch you, you're one of the folks I sit there and go, you know what? I'd love to have worked with him when I was there. So
Feelings mutual, man.
Thank you.
Feelings mutual.
Thanks, Lewis. Look forward to seeing you more on ESPN. That's Louis Riddick at Riddick ESPN. I follow him on Twitter. You should as well.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.